breakfast puppies?
This podcast contains adult language and content and is meant for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, I'm Kevin Siembieda of Palladium Books, and you're listening to the Glitterbois.
All right, dear listener, you've made it with us this far. We are 160 some episodes into the show. You've heard interviews with people that work behind the scenes at Palladium Books, but finally we've reached the moment we've been waiting for, where we hear the behind the scenes stories of one of the greatest RPGs of all time, Boomers. Tell us the great story of this game, Kevin.
Absolutely. Well, see, there's this cool idea I had, combining science fiction and fantasy with horror and post-apocalyptic and pretty much every genre you can think of. And the main character was going to be a boomer with his boom gun. And as these concepts kind of developed and expanded, there's a whole cast of other characters. It wasn't so much about the boomer. And then this damn anime came out called Bubblegum Crisis.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It's a great one. And its main villains were boomers. And I was like, I can't call my game Boomers because they'll be confused with Bubblegum Crisis. And I don't want that. So what the heck am I going to call it? And I just had no idea. And I called up my buddy Eric Woodrick, and I'm like, Eric, I just don't know what to do about this. And Eric was like, well, Kev, tell me about the game. And I'm like, well, see, there's these ley lines, and where two or more lines cross, there's it's a nexus point, and these rifts open up, and things come out of the rifts, and aliens come out of the rifts, and monsters come out of the rifts, and demons come out of the rifts. And you can go through the rifts, and rifts this, and rifts that. And Eric's like, well, Kev, why don't you call it Rift's World? Like, no, I don't know. Rift's World sounds funky, and not like David Brin's, Ring World, and I don't know. And he's like, well, just call it Rifts. And I'm like, it's not bad. Yeah, I guess it's a good working title. And a few years later, when it's ready to come out, I could not think of calling it anything except Riffs. And that's the story of Boomers.
That's the story of many an author who end up with the title of a major series being the working title they meant to getting around and replacing.
I mean, I think that's one of the stories behind how one of the great cinematic legends, Snakes on a Plane, happened.
Yeah.
Like, I think it had an actual name, but it was like its working title was Snakes on a Plane, and then that leaked out, and then all the fans were like, no, this is what it's going to be called. Well, Rifts, we've been talking about all the Palladium games, or at least most of them, up to this point, not necessarily chronologically, but at least in some manner of historical accuracy. Mm-hmm. In our last session, we talked about Robotech and the dawn of Mega Damage, and Rifts just sort of took that
and ran
with it.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you already made reference to this. I mean, obviously, anime factors somewhere into your creative juices that led to Rifts. What other sources were you really, really pulling from?
People always ask me that, and they ask me where my ideas come from, and really everything gives me ideas. In a lot of ways, I think Rifts was just sort of a culmination of everything. A big part of it was, even into the late 1980s, you had people arguing on how you couldn't have a setting where magic and technology coexisted. And I'm like, that's ludicrous. I've been playing it for a freaking decade now. Mm-hmm. Of course you can. And I just always loved the idea with role-playing that you can play anything, that you're really only limited by your imagination. So I wanted to have all these really cool elements in it. And, like I said, part of it originated with the idea of the boomers, which was the Glitterbois, of course, with his boom gun. And he was going to be this big hero. And he was like one of the starting linchpins for the concept. But as I started to, dive into it, and in my mind, this is like the aftermath out of, a golden age of human technology. So I'm thinking, well, human augmentation, that's got to be a major part of this. So I came up with, juicers and crazies and cyborgs, of course, and partial cyborgs and full combat cyborgs and, a bunch of different things. And then as you start bringing in magic, I came up with the Leyline Walker and the Mystic and some other stuff. And I just wanted everything in there, including dragon hatchlings. Because they're fun and, they're not as powerful, of course, as an adult dragon, let alone an ancient dragon. And I just wanted to have this fantastic setting that really was both science and technology with elements of all kinds of other stuff. I mean, with the alien intelligences, you have, nods to H.P. Lovecraft and, I'm sure all kinds of great movies from Star Wars to Blade Runner really, really influenced me in the long run. And strangely enough, I never realized it at the time, but one of my original Defiler players who also play tested Rifts, Tom Barthold, pointed out to me one day that, all the elements and Rifts were in my original Defilers campaign. And I'm like, no, that's not true. And he goes, Kev, you had Dr. Articulus, who was blending the twin sciences of magic and technology. That's your techno wizard. He goes, level 4 was basically the vampire kingdoms. Level 5 was your techno level. That's the coalition or triax or both. Of course, you had magic and all kinds of other crazy stuff going on and dragons because, it was a fantasy campaign. And he's like, I think this is it. And then also in Palladium of Desires, I mean, you would open up a door, bear in mind, you're in a underground dungeon. It was sort of a dungeon crawl because it started out D&D. But you could open up a door and there'd be a forest for as far as the eye could see because it was another dimension. We had time holes and pocket dimensions, and they ran into Doctor Who and Darth Vader and Killraven from Marvel's War of the Worlds.
Ooh, deep cut there. I'm like, wow, yeah.
So, we had all these bizarre things. The Defilers went to this alien world where, there were samurai trolls and it was just like all kinds of crazy shit, right? And Tom's like, Kev, in a lot of ways, this is like a refined version of the Palladium of Desires. Just on a much bigger scale. So I think those ideas were floating around for a long time. And then after Star Wars and some other cool movies and stuff, I sat back and went, I want to make Rifts my magnum opus. The game that just really does it all and lets you just uncork your imagination and run with it. And that was the big motivation behind it. So obviously I do from comic books as well, and anime, of course.
I gotta say, it's amusing that this was brought to you and you're like, no, because Palladium Fantasy was my first role-playing game ever. And for a long time, I can't even begin to do it now, but for a long time, I had memorized and could recite the Ballad of the Defilers from the beginning. Oh. I was obsessed with it. And when one day somebody's like, hey, you should check out this Rifts. It's got this and this and this and this. And it's like, oh, you mean it's a role-playing game about the Defilers? That sounds great. Let's do that. Yeah.
What was truly weird is Rifts hit me at like almost the perfect time. I remember this because a month before I saw Rifts in stores, I had fallen off the deep end and pulled something like 12 or 16 books from the public library about the Pentatonic Army, which was the U.S. Army's attempt during the late 50s through mid 60s on revamping themselves so they could fight before, during, and after an atomic war. And there is so much of the technology from the Glitterbois themselves through a lot of the things the Coalition built through et cetera, that have these weird little callbacks to the Pentatonic Army. And I've even noticed some of the art is inspired by concepts from vehicle design and such from the Pentatonic Army. And it was just perfect because it hit me in this right time, right place. And me and my friends in high school were huge fans of riffs.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, to really be able to cut loose and really create this, super deep world. One of my objectives was to make riffs more alien than 1,000 Alien Worlds. And yet have that familiarity so people would go, oh, I know this. This is Earth. And I'd be like, what?
Yep.
So I have a question for you about the origin of, well, let's just say one of, I think, the tabletop hobby's greatest love to kill them enemies. Because, as people say, there's 3 things that you can always kill without prejudice, without feeling bad. There's zombies. You can always kill zombies because it's already dead.
Yep.
They're dead. They're just here to eat you. You can always kill Nazis because nobody likes Nazis. And you can always kill the Coalition. What was the origin of the Coalition? Or let me rephrase that. When did the Coalition enter the picture for you on the design front of this game?
Pretty early on. I wanted to have a strong example of technology and a strong example of magic, and I wanted them to clash.
Mm-hmm.
So the Coalition states being the tech and the Federation of Magic being the unbridled, if not evil, certainly anarchist forces of magic. And so they came up pretty quick. Again, I was inspired by obviously Star Wars and the Stormtrooper. I love that. I loved Darth Vader's motif. Kevin Long and I liked the Nazi kind of references to some of that. We wanted to incorporate elements of that into the Coalition. Although bizarrely enough, the Coalition designs were actually done for Lancer's Rockers.
Oh, really?
The guy who was writing Lancer's Rockers wanted this like paramilitary Nazi-ish organization, and Kevin Long, we were at Gen Con, me and Long, and of course the crew, and Jeff Gomez, the guy who was writing Lancer's Rockers. And Long and I had also been talking about the Coalition already, and I think Kev had already designed the Glitterbois and I think Juicers. And anyways, he whips up this design, and I'm like, oh, Kev, that looks great. What's that for? Is that the Coalition? He goes, no, Kev, it's for Jeff's guys. I forget what they were even called.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh. And so Jeff comes by, and he's like, and the Kev's like, look at this. And he looks at it and he goes, oh, no. They're too villainous looking. It's too Nazi-like.
Yep.
I'm like,
perfect.
and I'm like, so Jeff, you don't want this at all? No. It's terrible. We can't do this. I don't want to use this. And I'm like, you're absolutely sure, right? And he's like, absolutely, no way this is going into Robotech. And I'm like, fantastic, Kev, it's the Coalition. It's perfect. And Gomez was like, wait, what? I'm like, and Kevin Long's like, sorry, Jeff, you had your chance.
That ship sailed about 15 seconds ago.
So one thing I've noticed over the course of these conversations is that if Kevin ever asks you twice and uses something along the lines of, are you absolutely sure? you need to stop and really think about it because he's got an idea.
I mean, he's a game master.
Yes.
When a game master asks you if you're sure, you need to reconsider your course of action.
So, I mean, it was just perfect. Obviously, Long went on to fine tune them and work up all the other uniforms and the variant helmets and stuff. And if I recall, he also came up with the Spider Skull Walkers at that same convention where he did the initial sketches. Like, Kevin, what do you think? And I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's when we decided too. I said, I love the Death Head motif. Can we carry that through all the designs from you know, some of the robots, and we came up with the Skullabots and the Death's Head's transport. When he showed me the Death's Head transport a few weeks later, I'm like, oh, baby. Yeah, this is it.
Yeah,
The
Death's
really
Head transport was like one of the iconic vehicles out of the first book.
You know, it's funny, that word iconic. So we have kind of a running gag on our show. Whenever we are talking about something else from Riffs, we're like, oh, it's one of the iconic things from Riffs. The joke being that every single image in that book is an iconic component of Riffs.
I mean, that first edition of Riffs just had some of the most banger art you put in one book. Like, there are books previous to Riffs that have great pieces of art, and like NPC and I have talked about this, where there are books that predate Riffs that overall have amazing collections of art, but Riffs is like a hit after hit after hit on page after page.
Those line walkers.
Oh, yeah. The line walker art is like, here is everything you need to know about Riffs right here.
It's almost as if somebody said, okay, hey, Kev, I need you to draw a wizard, but I need you to make it look not crappy. So we need to make wizards cool, and there the line walker happens. How wrong am I?
I mean, kinda. I mean, I said I need him to look like a wizard, but I need him to look like someone who can survive in the wastelands, and you know, maybe give him a gas mask or something similar. And I think you asked about other influences. I think certainly Road Warrior was an influence.
Yeah, definitely.
On both me and Kevin Long. And I think you see that influence in here and there in the certainly in the Leyline Walker and in the Juicer.
Yeah, the Leyline Walker especially looks like he could be swaggering through Bartertown out of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome so easily.
Absolutely.
So I want to show you something, Kevin. Okay, so throughout the years, I have had multiple copies of the original Rift book.
Right.
And I've lost multiple copies because I've lived in more places than I can even remember. And oftentimes those moves, you lose something, or you have to shed something to make room. And many times it would be my gaming books. Anyway, I always like get them back somehow, either from the people I gave them to, or I would just go buy them again online. So a couple years ago, I was putting together a original Rifts campaign, and I was like, oh shit, I don't actually have a physical copy of the Rifts book. So I order Rifts book online, order on eBay, right? But somebody, before I got it, colored in all of the butts.
Oh my gosh.
Drew like pants and shorts on the ladies. No, not pants, actual shorts, because the sleeves of the shorts are wider than the leg. You can tell that we're going for a style here with a ballpoint pen. Yep. It's beautiful.
That's crazy.
I have no idea who did it, but it's wonderful.
So I take it that like around the office, there was a lot of support for Riffs. Everybody thought it was a great idea. Did you all expect that it was going to be as well received as it was when it came out?
Sort of yes and sort of no, but I would say mainly no. So one of the problems is when you work on a book for 3.5 years, which is what I did on Riffs, and Kevin Long was probably involved in it for a good 1.5 years, where he really, sat down and finalized and banged out art and concepts. And And so after like 3.5 years, you start to doubt yourself left and right. And like a year before it even came out, because something must have been in the zeitgeist, because no one had done anything that kind of combined magic and technology. And then all of a sudden I hear about Torg, and I'm like, oh no, dimensional traveling and time and whatever. And it comes out and I'm like, oh, thank God, it's nothing like Rifts.
Yep.
And then we're at the 1989 Gen Con, and the whole place is abuzz about Shadowrun. And I'm like, oh no, Shadowrun, it's Rifts. And I get a copy and I'm like, oh, thank goodness, it's nothing like Rifts. Although it does have magic and technology in it.
Yeah.
So, and then Rifts is ready to go, and we were all excited. And we really wanted this thing to kill. And I thought it would be good. I thought it would be big. I mean, we pressed 10,000 copies to begin with, which is a lot, especially back in those days for an unproven property. But I'm just full of doubt. And the only person who knew it was going to be, was absolutely 100% convinced it was going to be the biggest thing we had ever done, was Kevin Long.
Nice.
And he was like, Kev, I'm telling you, this is the best thing you've ever written. You're going to sell out those 10,000 copies in a month. And I'm like, oh, no, Kev, our best-selling book ever was TMNT and Other Strangeness. And it took 3 months to sell out 10,000 copies. And this is a bigger book, and it's not an IP. And I don't know. I don't think so. But I'll be happy. I'll be thrilled out of my mind if it sells as well as TMNT. So the book is like a smash hit at Gen Con. We brought like 300 copies with us. Boom, it was sold out by Saturday morning. And I'm like, well, this is a good sign.
Damn.
And then I want to point out, Kevin Long was absolutely wrong. It did not sell out in a month. It sold out in 3 weeks.
Man, I feel sorry for all of those people who weren't able to make it till Gen Con until Saturday that day.
Yeah.
That weekend.
Yeah.
So it was crazy, and it was fun. In one of the, I knew we had a smash hit on our hands, because first of all, it sells out in 3 weeks, which was just mind bending to all of us except Kevin Long. And then it would take another 8 or 10 weeks for us to do a reprint. We immediately sent it in for a reprint. I think I sent in 20,000 copies to be reprinted. And oh my God, it was before the internet really took off. So we're getting phone calls, dozens of phone calls every day. Where's Rifts? I heard about Rifts. I want to get Rifts. And we're like, it'll be out in a couple months. I need it now. And it's like, and we didn't even save too many copies ourselves. So it was like, well, holy crap, dude, I can't pull it out of my shirt.
Yeah. No, just to underline what a big hit it was, my local gaming store back home had ordered a fairly substantial number of copies. And it sold on the local market pretty darn well. But we still had copies in stock up here, and people were driving the 160 miles up from the Twin Cities because we still had copies that they could purchase, and that during that period. And so it was even back then we knew it was selling well, just because I'd be sitting there like chatting with the store owner who I became good friends with, and somebody would come bebopping, and literally the only reason he drove all the way up from the Twin Cities was to pick up a copy of Rifts. He got back into his car and drove all the way back down.
That's awesome.
I am not surprised to hear that Kevin Long was pretty passionate about this, because you can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at these pieces in here, and that crimson red cyborg, and that mostly blue and white lane walker that's sort of walking with his arm up from that. It's from like a Citizen Kane downward angle. Like,
Yeah.
so much in here is clearly done by somebody who was interested in what they were doing.
That was a question I wanted to ask. Is this the first Palladium product that had color plates?
Yes.
Well, I mean, you felt confident enough about the product that you threw in for the extra, not insubstantial printing costs to dump in, what is it, a dozen pages of colored plates?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 16 pages of color plates in the original book. Yeah, 2 8-page sections. No, we really were. I really was. I mean, I like I said, I really saw it as my magnum opus. You never know how it's going to do. And I just thought, well, I want to make it as impactful as we can. And a lot of it just really came together from cover to cover, really. It just, Keith Parkinson, it was funny because I was telling him about it, and he was looking for different work. And I said, Keith, I'd really like you to do the cover to Riffs. And he's like, I don't know, Kev, what is it? I'm kind of tired of doing fantasy and stuff. And I'm like, that's the thing. It's not science fantasy. And I started telling him about techno-wizardry, and he like practically, teleported through the telephone lines. I mean, he was like so animated. He's like, Kev, I've been dying to do something like this where you have technology, but it's really magic and weird stuff. And I'm like, give it a shot, man, do it. And then he got like swamped at TSR because, he was part of that big, awesome bullpen with like Larry Elmore and Jeff Easley and several other folks. I don't know if Brom was there yet or not. And, but just this cavalcade of just great artists, and D&D was like at its zenith, and for TSR, obviously nothing equates to what D&D is doing today. But and I call up Keith, and I'm like, Keith, I need that cover. And he's like, oh yeah, wait, Kev, I'll send you. And it was back in the fax days, and he had like the shittiest fax. And so we get this big, long piece. It's like, I don't know, it's bigger than 11 by 17, I think. And it comes in like several pieces, and we tape it together, and I'm like, holy shit, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I wanted, Keith. This is amazing. And so he paints it up, and the thing is, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
To get it to the printer in time for Gen Con. And it's back in a day where, again, you don't have that technology where you just scan it.
Yep.
There's no scanning. It's amazing some of the pieces of art that came to me in the mail. And that was one of them. That cover shows up in the mail. Well, first of all, we're waiting, and Keith calls me up, and I'm like, Keith, I need that painting. He goes, I know, Kevin. I know. I'm so sorry. The paint won't dry. It's an oil painting. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it's still wet, Kev. I might put it in the oven. And I'm like, don't put it in the oven. I don't know if you do it. You can do it. Donato does it all the time, and I might do it, but I'm like, well, Keith, give it a couple more days. And so it finally arrives in the mail, and it's fantastic. And I run it off to get transparency shot and to take it to the printer. We had to stop on the way to Gen Con to pick up those 300 copies, quite literally hot off the presses. So it was kind of crazy, but I mean, yeah, he just nailed it. I talked to him about a lot of the different elements in it that I wanted, and the aspect of the riffs and the alien and the technology and the familiar and the bizarre, and he just really got it. And sent in that cover, and we were just all blown away. And then, you guys are right. I mean, Kevin Long was just so into this project. He was just so into it. And I think it's some of the best of his work ever. I wish I bought every freaking piece of art that was in that book, but I didn't.
So I have to ask this question because, as we mentioned in a prior episode, I've helped out in the publishing printing business a little bit here and there. You mentioned you picked them up on the final copies on the way to Gen Con. I have to ask, I assume you were in a car of some sort?
Oh, we were in a, well, I mean, we were in a car, well, a mini Toyota minivan, and
Yep.
then we had rented a 26-foot long truck. We used to have a big
Okay.
eight back then at Gen Con, and
I'm just picturing you all in like a Dodge Astrovan with 300 fresh printed copies of Rifts in the back. And I was going to ask, like, how high were you by the time you got there from all of the ink fumes?
Oh yeah, somebody's sitting in the back seat and they've got like a pile of books under their right arm, a pile of books under their left. They're holding back the the tide of copies.
Because I remember doing a pickup of like several thousand, in this case, printed programs, which are like, it probably would have taken 20 to equal the size of one Rifts book. So about the same volume of books in the back of a minivan. And in the 45-minute drive I had to, by the time I got out of the car, I was like so high. Just it was like,
Those fumes.
those
they went
fumes.
in the back of a rental truck.
Okay.
So but yeah, that would have been pretty bad because, you know, back then Gen Con was in Milwaukee.
Uh-huh.
It was like a 7-hour drive for us. So that would have been
Would have been great.
we were pretty high as it was because you know, we were just so excited about the release, and you know, Palladium was really in some ways just about to hit its zenith, because I mean, we had TMNT and Other Strangeness, which was huge. We had Robotech, which was huge. The Robotech videotapes had just come out and they were huge. And then Riffs, it was just like, holy moly, just one smash hit after another. And we were flying high emotionally.
So when Riffs first came out, what was your favorite OCC out of the original book?
That's kind of tough.
I know.
You know, there's a lot of good ones in there. I obviously the Glitterbois was the first one I came up with, so that has a special place. And I love the Leyline Walker and the way magic worked, because we really defined it with ley lines and such. But I think the Juicer might have been my favorite in the moment.
Yeah.
He's this tragic hero.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You know, I also kind of like how Riffs really cemented and we've talked about this on previous episodes. Riffs really cemented the Palladium to heck with your concept of game balance between player classes, because you have everything from the city rat all the way up to the Glitterbois to this dragon hatchling over here. It's like there is only the barest nod to the concept of class balance and that sort of thing. And it's all more about how that balance comes out in the story rather than in the mechanics. And it was kind of, you talk about it as your magnum opus, and in many ways it's the magnum opus of player character balance comes in the game, in how the game is played, not in what the mechanics of the game are.
Yeah, I would tend to concur. I mean, for me, it's all about character and story. So I wanted to give players every possible cool type of character, from, you know, the brainiac scholar to, you know, the field medic doctor to, you know, the crazy mage that pumps magic into machines and everything else. And again, I think that comes back to my comic book roots, where you've got characters like Daredevil and Captain America and Nick Fury, who, you know, are not the Thing or Mr. Fantastic or Thor. They're just not on those same levels. But they all work within the story. And that's cool. Not everyone wants to play Superman or Thor or Spider-Man. You know, they want to play different characters, smaller characters, characters with more nuance. I had, I got, when we do our Christmas grab bags, there's that comment section. And I had this beautiful little note from this guy who was saying, Kev, I discovered riffs when I was like 12, 13. And, for like 5 years, 6 years, we were just power gamers. We had this legion of Glitterbois, and then, we played juicers, and we were just all into, the power and this and that. But you know what? Now I'm playing a rogue scholar and I'm loving it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah, you were 15 and now you're, 35 or 40, and that your viewpoint changes a lot over those 20 years, and your tastes change. Absolutely. And that's why, I never, some people poo-poo power gamers, and I'm like, look, I don't care. As long as they're having fun,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. I don't care if you're a power gamer. I don't care what kind of style of game you run. If you and your players are having fun, yay, you're doing it right.
There's this beautiful simplicity, in my opinion, a simplicity in design that comes from not forcing balance. I find it's so freeing. You when you realize that I don't actually care if these two characters can output the same amount of numbers, but in different ways during a combat round, suddenly you are free.
Mm-hmm.
You can develop these characters however you want. But then you also you can look back at the source fiction and just point at it for other people to say, hey, not only is this possible in your games, but these games are inspired by fiction where this is how it happens. Just step back a couple of games in the Palladium catalog and you have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, the cartoon, maybe not so much, but the comic books, April O'Neil was an extremely capable character.
Oh, yeah.
Now, she couldn't get out there and kung fu some enemies to death, but she was capable, she was smart, she was driven, she was not usually a damsel kind of thing. She was 100% potentially playable character, and that player could have fun with that character next to 4 ass-kicking Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, very much so.
And then Rift just sort of takes that and expands it. And I think it works.
I think so. And like I said, it was my magnum opus. I really wanted to bring in all the different kinds of beautiful stories that people could play, and all kinds of different characters that they could play.
And I want to add a thing that you had said earlier when you saw Shadowrun in 1989 Gen Con. Shadowrun does something that I see so often in other games. And don't get me wrong, I love Shadowrun. I played Shadowrun for many, 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 many years. It was one of my go-to games for many reasons. But Shadowrun does a thing that a lot of other role-playing games do, that a lot of, sadly, video games also do, that Rift took the opposite approach. And that thing is, you have magic and you have technology, and we're going to put them in the same game, but they're opposed. You can be a mage or you can be into technology, but you can't do both.
Mm-hmm.
And Rift's just like, fuck it, go for it. That sounds cool. Yeah.
So you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to ask about. You mentioned that when early on, while you were looking for art for the very first book, you mentioned whether this would fit Triax or not, which that opens up a question. How much of what became the world of Rifts was actually floating around in your head at that point? Because there's a lot of people who would probably assume that the entire concept of Triax in the German states didn't exist until probably maybe a year before that book came out. Was when you were writing up the original book, was Atlantis already a thing in your head? Was Triax already? How much of the world had already been sort of at least sketched out in your head?
That's a great question. More than I think people would think. A lot of it did kind of come as fans were like, oh, I want this. This is so exciting. But, before the Rifts RPG came out, I already had ideas for Atlantis, for the Vampire Kingdoms, the Yucatan Peninsula, England. I had vague ideas about Germany and the new German Republic and Triax. Kevin Long actually ran with a lot of that and came up with a lot of those great designs. But it was already out there. I mean, Triax designs were already in my mind. So, yeah, there was a fair amount. I mean, obviously Archie, because that was the first source book.
Yep.
Archie and the East Coast. I knew I wanted Dinosaur Swamp in Florida. I knew I wanted to do like a Lone Star and, you know, cowboys and dinosaur kind of setting. You know, at the time I didn't know it would become 3 books. You know, and honestly, and that's the cool thing too, is some of this would inspire other people. So I come out with Lone Star and I'm working on New West, and Wayne Bro calls me up and says, Kev, I've got this great idea for Spirit West. We can do more of the Indian nations. And I'm like, well, we got to be really delicate with that. We don't want to offend people. And he's like, no, I got these great ideas, and let me run with it. And if you like it, use it. And he did a beautiful job with that. And I went in and fine tuned it and cleaned it up. And I knew I wanted to do stuff with Canada. It's funny because a lot of Canadians will come up to me and say, oh my gosh, we're so happy that you actually acknowledge our frickin' nation, which is, you know, our country is as large as the flipping United States or larger. And yet, you know, we're so seldom mentioned. And, you know, that just kind of comes from the fact that I love Canada. You know, we're right here, and I grew up in Detroit. So, I mean, Windsor's are literally across the river. And, you know, my family, we grew up poor. So it was like cool and exotic to go to this foreign country. But, you know, you're just driving over the bridge and into this other land, which is, you know, very recognizable. And we'd go to Canadian parks and things, and went to Toronto for my honeymoon. And, you know, we just loved Canada. And I had a lot of Canadian friends because of the close proximity. So, of course, Canada had to be a major part of the Rift story. So, yeah, I mean, a fair amount of it was there. But, I mean, stuff like the Jews Are Uprising, that came out of C.J. Carella. Skyscape was, I don't remember if I had mentioned it prior to that and CJ ran with it or whether he came up with it entirely. A lot of times people have these concepts and then I come up with titles. I thank Stan Lee for this. I think reading gazillions of comic books with these great titles by Stan Lee made me good at naming books and characters and things.
Okay. Speaking of areas of the world, there's many times I've seen in online conversations regarding the development and the expansion of the Rift universe. And many times that this has even come up in our own conversations. Are there elements of the world which are officially off limits for major publication? And an example that is frequently given is the US West Coast. There's been nothing about the US West Coast so far that I've seen. Are these considered to be left open intentionally, or is it that just nobody's got there yet?
I have some very specific ideas for the West Coast.
Okay.
And I just haven't gotten there yet. And then there's some places where it's just sort of volatile subject matters, and again, you don't want to offend anybody. So like the Middle East, we tend to try to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, there's really nothing in my mind that's really off limits. It's just we haven't quite gotten there yet. You know, I had a guy who really wanted to do a bunch of stuff with India, and it's funny because, you know, people don't understand the creative process. Sometimes it's tricky stuff. So it's what happened with Mechanoid Space. It's what happened with Rifts India, where I had a couple of authors and you know, different authors in both of those examples. that were all fired up on stuff, and they got me fired up, and it's why we now have that policy of not talking about upcoming books in case things fall apart. And the World of Warcraft, United Worlds of Warlock is another one where it's like, these are great ideas, run with it, and then it's like, oh, the manuscript just is not there. Or in the case of Mechanoid Space and Rifts India, the two authors, at some point they call me up and go, Kev, how excited I was about this idea. I'm like, yeah, I got nothing.
Oh, like I can't even imagine trying to bite off India from a Rift's perspective. That's pretty intense.
There's a lot of great history. I mean, them and Indian myth and China. I mean, oh my gosh, talk about crazy gods and stuff. But in the case of India, a lot of that stuff is still, a practicing religion. And again, you don't want to offend anyone by pulling characters out of their religious beliefs and making them into superheroes or monsters or good guys, villains, whatever. You just, like having, here's Jesus Christ, and it's like,
exactly.
People would have heart attack if you had that in any kind of role-playing book. So, I don't want to offend anyone. That's why we've also avoided voodoo, because for a lot of people, voodoo is, a spooky Twilight Zone kind of belief. But no, for a lot of people, it's a real religious belief. And I don't want to offend people by going into those areas. So, that kind of stuff is kind of off the plate. But most everything is fair game. And especially if we do it right. Someone could come up to me and go, hey, here's this, that I thought couldn't really be done well without offending people, and it might be magnificent. And I go, oh, great, let's publish this.
You had mentioned United Worlds of Warlock, and that brings me to another train of thought that some of our listeners on our Discord have also talked about, which is the Dimension Book series of Rifts. Were there ever plans for things beyond the Phase World series? Because it kicks off with just a punch, this wonderful, just like punch through with Wormwood, one of the most awesome things that's ever been written. And then it goes into Phase World. Now, Phase World's pretty cool. And then from that point, it seems like it's mostly been Phase World. And I get that there's a lot to tell about Phase World. But has ever thought about maybe spinning that off into just its own game and then taking the dimensions into weirder places?
Oh, no, you can do all kinds of different things with the Dimension books and with or without, taking Phase World and the Three Galaxies into their own realm, so to speak. It's just we've been so busy with other things or rebuilding the company or dealing with tragedy or success. It's funny, everything comes with its own kind of basket of things you got to deal with. No, I wanted the whole idea behind the Dimension books was to be able to branch out into all kinds of different worlds and dimensions and maybe even alternative Earths. We've kicked around a few things, but we just haven't really gotten to it. Just like with Chaos Earth, I really wanted to do a whole lot more with Chaos Earth.
Oh, yeah.
And then other things have happened. I still want to do a whole lot more with Chaos Earth. But, other things happen and you have other priorities and you got to do what's best for the company sometimes. And, Beyond the Supernatural is a great example of that. It's one of my personal favorite settings. I've been dying to do Beyond Arcanum and Tomes Grotesque for freaking decade or more. And, it's just a matter of, I could do that and spend, 6 months doing those two books, or I could do these other books that I know are going to generate money, or focus on this that came up that we weren't expecting, or work on this book or that book that I can knock out faster. It just, again, it's tricky. It's hard to, it's a creative process. Yeah. So hard to you can't just turn it on and off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can to some degree, but not really. And sometimes things happen where it's just not there. Or all of a sudden some new idea grabs you and it's like, I know I'm supposed to write these 3 or 4 books, but oh my God, I can't stop thinking about, X. So you sit down to write X just to get it out of your head so you can focus on other stuff.
Yeah. How much of Chaos Earth that has come out, how much of that is similar to your original thoughts on the Golden Age and the fall of the Golden Age and the coming of the Rifts? Like, how similar is what we're getting to what was originally in your head when you put all this together?
It's pretty there. I had a pretty elaborate backstory for what Rifts was, the Golden Age of Man, and having other authors try to come in and work on Chaos Earth. The real problem is they don't take it far enough, because it's unlike, you look at some of the Star Trek prequels and they're like, oh, the technology is too advanced for it to be the prequel. But that's the cool thing about the Golden Age of Man. How much crap have we forgotten? How much stuff has not resurfaced? Who knows what could be from the Golden Age of Man? And we got some cool stuff in the works coming up. I think people will be pleased.
I got a small bone to pick with you about Rift, sir. And it was brought to my attention because I was on a group chat earlier this week with actually my group of friends from high school. We earlier this week, we found out that one of our group of friends from high school, growing up super rural, it was literally the people we went to elementary school with as well. So I'm very close friends. One of them had passed away. And so life happens. It is what it is. But so we fired up a group chat because we had just learned about it and we're passing on, like, when is the funeral, what actually happened, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And it got to us reminiscing because that group of friends was substantially around gaming. We were all gamers. Why did you decide to feed my home state to a bunch of bugs? What do you secretly have against Minnesota, Kevin? Because
that question comes up on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, there is a certain amount of Minnesota. What the heck did we do to you? But no, it actually, I mentioned that I was going to be talking to you this weekend, and because Rifts had been a very substantial part of our gaming experience, it got brought up. Oh, you mean, and somebody literally responded with, oh, you mean the guy who fed us to the bugs?
Well, I think you should leave this in because I think it's great. It's a valid question. I had a very bad experience in Minnesota, and so I fed it to. No, it's not true at all. It's back to, I want sections of Rift's Earth to be completely alien and strange. And lucky you, Minnesota happened to be one of those places. I have nothing against Minnesota. I've got a really dear friend who lives in Minnesota. I hear Minnesota's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. If you're going to pick some part of the United States that's a little bit alien and strange to most people who go there, I mean, Minnesota does qualify.
Listen, my friends.
I mean, it's not like we're talking about Alabama, which is practically an entirely different universe.
Because I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and it is an entirely other universe.
I've never been to Alabama.
You're not missing much.
Yeah.
It's hot and it's wet. Yeah.
Sounds a lot like Louisiana.
No, but at least Louisiana has more culture and better bars.
I mean, the only thing Alabama has it going for it is it has a knockoff version of Mardi Gras.
Okay, I will fucking fight you.
Really? realize you're ostracizing all your Alabama.
No, we've talked on the mics before about our home states, and that was a very intentional trolling of my good friend here, because he is a proud proponent of the fact that
Mardi Gras started in my hometown. God damn it!
I've heard that before. I've heard that. Mardi Gras actually started in Alabama,
Yep.
and New Orleans stole it.
Yep.
So
Bastards.
what can I say? But let's also point out that I've also like nuked most major cities.
Yep.
Chicago's gone, Detroit's gone, New York City is a haunted cesspool, and I love all those places.
So, Kevin, how does it feel to have personally nuked those cities?
It feels good.
Yeah.
I mean, you did a number on the whole state of Ohio, as you should.
I'm just grateful that my hometown was mentioned in the Rifts book. It's underwater, but it's mentioned as being underwater. And I gotta say, when a bunch of us rednecks from Mobile, Alabama saw that, we're like, yeah.
You know what? That's why I did it. Not specifically Mobile, but why I try to take a lot of the big cities out and put in a lot of other smaller communities, because I noted when Beverly Hills Cop came out, the movie,
Mhm.
it was set in Detroit, or at least starts in Detroit. And our then police commissioner was actually in the movies. He's that guy's a real guy. He was a real cop. And oh my God, Detroit just went crazy. The whole Metro Detroit area went crazy because there's Detroit in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really stuck with me that it's fun and exciting when you see your hometown in a piece of fiction, whether it's a book or a movie or a comic or whatever. And so I was very, very deliberate. It's annoying, if you're looking for your part of the country, because everything happens on the West Coast or East Coast, it seems like, and occasionally Chicago. So it's like, hey, let's explore other parts of the flipping world, shall we?
How often do you, the creator of Rifts, actually get to play as a player in Rifts?
Well, so first off, I don't really like to be a player in any game, or I should say any RPG. I'm so used to being the game master, and I love being the game master. And when I'm a player, I tend to be that disruptive player, because when I get bored, it's like, what's over there? Let's go there. And the game master's like, no, we're on the way to wherever. And I'm like, yeah, but we can go there tomorrow. What's over here?
I feel you. I'm the same. I will have people in my games say, hey, I'm thinking of running the thing. Would you be interested to play? I'd love if you could play. And my response is usually, I am honored that you would love to run a game for me. I am the worst player you will ever have in your games. You don't want me. Yeah.
Well, I think I do stuff that just I've come to realize aren't real typical. Like I said, I like a lot of nuanced games. I'm into storytelling and character. So, for example, I was in one of Sean Patrick Fannon's I guess demos. I don't know if it was still on a playtest stage for Rifts for Savage Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like you just mentioned, NPC, he was dying to have a bunch of Palladium folks play in a game. And we didn't want to disappoint him. And so we're like, all right, we'll play in this game. So we're playing in this game. And I felt like I really threw him for a loop when I said, my mind melter, I said, we're going to steal a page out of Star Wars. I'm going to have this character bring me into the big bad guys as his captive and turn me into the big bad. And I'm going to try to use my mind melter powers to mentally possess him. and he seemed like thrown by the fact that I wanted to bluff
Mm-hmm.
that my character could die. And he's like, your character could die. And I'm like, yeah. Because if you do this, and if he saves, and this thing's really powerful, so he's likely to save, he'll know you attacked him, and he'll kill you. And I'm like, yeah. But if it succeeds,
sounds pretty awesome.
I saved the whole group, and I'm willing to take that risk. Plus I'm not a sissy boy gamer. My character dies, he dies, and he's going out in a blaze of glory. So let's do it, man. And he just seemed really thrown by that. And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "I am positive." And maybe it was he didn't want to kill the creator of Rifts. I don't know. There could have been a factor too. But we go in there, and it's funny because exactly what he said happens. I try, and nothing works. The guy saves, and he's about to kill me, and I try it again. The guy saves again, and I've got like 2 ISP points left, which is worth diddly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh well, here it comes. And this is why I love role-playing games, and it's cooperative gaming, and Wayne Smith was playing. I forget if he was playing a Glitterbois. I think he was playing a Glitterbois or something that had sniping capabilities. And he's like, "Well, wouldn't my turn come before he kills Kevin?" And he's like, "Yes, it would." And he was like, "Can I try to blow this guy's head off?" and Fannon's like, "Yeah, sure." And I don't know what the equivalent of a natural 20 is in Savage Worlds, but that's what Wayne rolls. And this thing's about to rip me in half, and his head explodes, and I'm like, "Yes, Wayne!"
Now, a true mind melter would have taken that moment to point at their head and say, "Who's next?"
Because he's still got flunkies around. He has to have flunkies around. Who's next?
I did that. Well, yeah, you can't mask a boom.
Yeah, no.
But still. Yeah. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, I love those moments because when I sit down to run a game, even something as, logistically, narratively complex as Rift, because there's a living world around you. There's so much going on. But even still, when I sit down to run, my notes are like a sheet of paper with maybe 20 words written on it, and I just go from there. I love it when that happens. Like when someone's like, "Okay, I'm going to do this crazy ass thing," and I'd be like, "Okay, you're about to, you're basically walking up to someone and telling them to shoot you in the face, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I say, "Okay, no, it's awesome. I just want you to know." Mm-hmm. All right, let's go. Yes, make this happen, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Except then you as a GM can sometimes feel a little guilty. You're like, "Oh, I killed someone." Okay, next.
As someone who's put you in that position more than once.
Yeah.
No, sir, I know full well what I'm doing.
Yep.
I know the ticket I'm buying.
And I usually don't really feel guilty when, as a game master, I kill a player, because I find most characters that perish in a game either do so out of deliberate sacrifice to save somebody, so it's a very heroic, dramatic moment, or they're idiots and they do something profoundly stupid or reckless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey, because I always try to warn them, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Because, and if they say yeah, and then they die, it's like, okay, roll up a new character.
Yep.
I want to talk about the art again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's Rifts. How can you not talk about the art?
We could just gush and gush and gush and gush and gush about Kevin Long's art in here, and it would be well-deserved, well-received gushing. But I also want to point out the wonderful contrast of Larry McDougall. Kevin Long provides all of these crisp, cool bits of technology, the high tech. He shows the high world of this game. And then McDougall comes in and shows you the dirty, gruesome, gritty, grimy underworld of the game.
Is the Wilderness Scout picture a McDougal?
Wilderness Scout, I'm pretty sure, is a Kevin Long.
Okay.
Actually, I'm pretty sure it's a Kevin Siembieda.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wilderness Scout, it says Long on it.
Oh, okay. The Wilderness Scout, right. It's the Vagabond.
The Vagabond is 100% Kevin Siembieda. I love the Vagabond picture so much that I'm really sad about the Rift Ultimate Edition Vagabond. I'm sad that this guy didn't return.
Yeah.
This guy's awesome.
Yeah.
I love him so much. Vagabond, okay. Yeah. Let's push the pretty art aside. Vagabond. Best class? Yeah? Seriously? Anybody else?
I mean, it's not bad.
He can drive a car and he can cook and he can maybe punch a guy. That's all you need to get by in this world. He gets an amazing number of skills as he levels up. It's like the sky's the limit. The Vagabond is so wonderful.
I think so.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I don't debate it. I just have my personal favorite, as we've talked about in the past, and
okay, then
the Wilderness Scout still is the best.
It's a good one. It's really good. They actually share a physical page.
Yes,
physical page in the book. Yes.
I'm just growing up in a rural setting and such. It's the Wilderness Scout has always spoke to me. While it wasn't the first character I ever played in Rifts, it was indeed the second. So,
Well, that's a great example of why are these characters in here? Why aren't they all powerhouses?
Mm-hmm.
Because not everyone wants to play that. And you enjoyed that character just as much as any other. And it's all about the storytelling, character and story. That's what role-playing should be all about.
exactly.
So at what point did you decide to put the dragon in the game?
Pretty early on.
Yeah.
I always liked the idea, and I toyed about making it available in Palladium Fantasy and didn't. And I'm like, man, if it goes anywhere, it's Rifts.
I think the dragon is one that a lot of people misread because they see it as a whole lot of power. I see it as one of the greatest role-playing opportunities in this book. You are essentially playing a toddler with a lot of power. A toddler who knows everything, but you're still a toddler, and it's wonderful. I will die on this hill, and that hill is the Hatchling Dragon is the best character to hand to a brand new player. Someone who knows absolutely nothing about Rifts. They know nothing about anything that's going on. They don't understand the mechanics, but you know what? They know what a dragon is. Like, everybody knows what a dragon is. You say, guess what? You're going to play this character. You have a handful of magical powers. You have a handful of psionics. You probably will never die because you have more mega damage than anything else in the book. So yeah, just go play. Do what you want and see what you like the most. And from there, if you want to make another character, we can explore that a little more deeply. My rant is over. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
I'm not going to disagree. I think they're fun to play.
Yeah.
One of my early play tests, one of my players played a dragon hatchling that was like, I don't know, 8 hours old.
So
and,
nice.
He metamorphs into a beautiful woman. And the rest of the group dresses her up and stuff because it doesn't know that it shouldn't walk around naked. And there were just a lot of, like you said, a ton of great role-playing opportunities. In fact, they were in a SDC combat. And I think a couple of the bad guys had MDC pistols. So the group was like really in trouble. And the dragon like charges as this woman and gets blasted, and the rest of the group didn't know what he was. And so when he takes a couple energy blasts, they're like, this is not a normal human being. And then I felt bad for the player because he's like, I'm going to try to knock this guy out. And I said, so roll to see if you knock him out. And he rolled terrible, so he didn't knock him out. And I said, I said, roll. I had him. I said, roll to strike, And he goes, well, I'm going to hit him with my full strength to knock him out. I'm like, your full strength? He goes, yes, my full strength. Rolls a natural 20.
Oh, no.
His hand just goes like right through
Oof.
this guy's head. The head goes, what's left of it goes flying. The player like actually screams because he didn't expect that to happen. And I'm like, dude, you're a mega damage creature that just hit him with every bit of strength you had. Yeah. And it stopped the fight real quick because the other 2 or 3 bad guys were like, holy shit, this chick's a cyborg or something alien. You know, none of them imagined that she was a dragon. And it was just great. You know, playing it as an innocent, like you said, toddler. You know, yeah, they have some magic powers and psionic powers and a bunch of MDC and can bioregenerate. That's great. But they don't know what they're doing. Everything's new to them. They're exploring everything. And that's one of the things that we've kicked around, and I probably shouldn't say anything because God knows if we'll ever do this book. But for years, we've thought about doing a Rift's Dragon source book.
Ooh.
And in it, talk about how dragons function and how they think and why in the course of this creature's life, which can span thousands of years, how they probably go from one alignment to the next because their viewpoint changes and things that happen to them change their view of the world. And can you imagine an embittered dragon that wants revenge?
Uh-oh.
Yep.
I have played that hatchling. Yeah.
So, you know, it's fun. And then, you know, just being long-lived and seeing, oh, your SDC buddies die over the years, that's rough. And there's a lot of different cool things you could really talk about in the evolution of a dragon, just from hatchling to adult, let alone beyond.
You know, that actually brings a question to my mind. And this is kind of the age-old question about campaign play in RPG is, how many characters have you seen go from level 1 to 15?
Oh, very few.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the highest any of my players got was like level 11 or 12. And that was a few. I had numerous ones I got up to level 9. But not much higher than that.
Yeah, I think the highest I ever got a character straight up from level 1 through natural play and not through like speeding it up or a story event that moves things along, but through just playing the character was in a Beckme's D&D, Mincer D&D era game, and I got from like level 1 to level 16. But you know, that's a 36 level game, so that was nothing. But yeah, I think when I've run Palladium games, when I've run Rifts, the longest campaign that I ran where characters leveled up playing the same character from the beginning would have been about 9. Yeah. That seems to be the most common.
Well, in my experience system is set up so that you kind of grow an experience more rapidly, but then it starts to slow down. You need to get a lot more experience after like level, 5. And so things really start to slow down, just like in real life. You know, you learn, you get to a certain plateau, and then it kind of just slows down because you already know a lot of your stuff and you're using those same skills over and over. And, but typically level 8, 9 is about it.
Yeah. Going in a completely different direction from that, back to the looking at the source books and the world books. I'm assuming that you probably had things like the Vampire Kingdoms and whatnot, like pretty strongly in your head at the beginning. I mean, that book is one of the best of the Rifts books, I think. Vampire Kingdoms is a solid book. And there's so much rich world there that you had to have had that, like, being like, I know where this is going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Were there any books that later came out that you're like, this is great, this is nothing like I initially thought it was going to be?
Oh, that's a great question. Is there? Underseas kind of went its own way. And then the China books were kind of a collaboration. I didn't really have any real expectations on those. I think Mindworks kind of places that I wasn't originally anticipating.
That book is so good too.
Yeah. It still stands as one of my favorites.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on that one, and it was another one of those books where it's one of those books where there's such a small page count, and you're like, we can do so much with this.
I'm not going to lie. Right before Mindworks came out, I was actually getting a little burnt out on Rifts. And to the point where I was entertaining an offer from a friend to sell off my Rifts collection just because the juice had kind of been squeezed.
I know. Yeah, sure.
And then you drop Mindworks. And I was like, nope, I'm back. it. Now, I mean, up until that point, it had some of the strongest writing, in my opinion, since like the original big three of the first edition, Vampire Kingdoms, and Atlantis. It was like suddenly Mindworks came out and came swinging. And I really liked that kind of more interesting take on something like Archie, but completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I absolutely loved it. It reignited my passion for the game at a time when I was almost done. And yeah.
That's cool. It also has a great Kevin Long cover.
Oh, yeah.
That look on her face.
And talk about a cover that links directly to the story you're telling in that book so perfectly. Yeah, it's right there. We were talking in a previous episode about how the cover for Beyond the Supernatural is perfect for Beyond the Supernatural.
Yeah.
The cover for Mindworks is absolutely perfect for the book Mindworks.
Yeah. It's so good.
I agree. And then another book that kind of went into weird directions is actually one of our newer books, which is Coalition Manhunters.
Yeah.
I thought I had a pretty strong idea on what I was going to do, and then it turns more into not just about the Manhunters, but all the new psionics is, I think, really good, and that I think a lot of people, when they heard, oh no, 50 new psionic abilities, they thought, oh, here comes a power creep, and it certainly is not. It's just a whole new bunch of areas of psychic ability for investigative and manhunting purposes. And then the surprise for me in that book was two things. One was the amount of information that came out about coalition society and ordinary people. And then the revisit of Dog Boys and Killhounds. And that comic strip was just sort of a weird thing that Nick Bradshaw had thrown together, and someone else was supposed to write it. And so for me, that was just a super fun challenge of, here's a comic strip that's already all done. The guy who actually wrote it, Nick Bradshaw, or who drew it, did not have a specific story in his mind, which is kind of bizarre. And so I felt like Stan Lee, which is one of my idols, because here's the comic, it's all done. Now I got to go in and create a story for it. And it was weird and challenging and fun, and is a great story. I've had a lot of people come back and tell me, wow, I love that story. It really fleshed out Dog Boys or Killhounds for me. And I guess a lot of people think of Dog Boys as very much humanoid dogs that just kind of growl, and they're more like Scooby-Doo than people. Ruh-roh, and it's like, no. they're yes, they do rely on instincts and stuff, but they have feelings and emotions, and and it just so that book really surprised me.
One of my favorite books of the whole Rifts catalog isn't even a game book. It's Tales from the Chi-Town Burbs.
Yes.
The fiction, it is a a book that I have a hard time explaining to other people because it's a good story.
Yeah.
It is well-written fiction, well put together fiction that follows a loose skeleton of a beginning to end kind of an arc that I want more of that. Oh God, just seeing into the Coalition Burbs in that way told me so much more about how to portray it in my games, about how to explain the residents of the burbs. And like, I remember up until that point, I kept reading and seeing the burbs mentioned in books and be like, oh, whatever, I don't care about that. And then I read the short stories, and that suddenly I was hooked. It's like, I need more of this. That book made the Coalition happen in my brain. Like suddenly I understood more about its actual citizens. So what you have just said about Manhunters, suddenly I'm interested. Yeah. I want to know more.
Well, and I think it's one of the best books I've written ever. I was just really on it's funny, I kind of struggled with it, especially with the Thought Police, which was something that Mark Oberle turned in. I had to make it work. There were some really good ideas in there, but I thought I needed more clarification, and that kind of threw me for a long time. I was hung up on just that section for a long time. But once I got through it, I think it made the rest of the book that much stronger. And really helped me figure out where I wanted to go with things. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jacob.
No. I'm actually going in some of the same direction you are. While I have my go-to character classes, one of the ones that often has raised an eyebrow over the years is I'm not hesitant about playing things like Dead Boys or the Samus Pilot or those other Coalition focused OCCs. And this got me thinking, your comment, NPC, got me thinking about it. And part of it is that I grew up around a lot of people who survived xenophobic authoritarian societies and were immigrants to the United States because of it. And so it's like there's a story thread there that is so interesting to explore. Not necessarily to celebrate it, but the story of the people involved and how their lives are shaped by it and such can be heroic in its own way, similar to like everything from the Czech resistance of World War II under, Nazi occupation to things in our modern day. And so it's one of those things where once you actually look into the Coalition a bit more, you don't find that they're right, but you find the stories that exist inside there that are interesting to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yep. Because everything's not black and white, and everything is a matter of perception and degree.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, to the actual citizens of Chi-Town, I'm not talking about the burbs, the people who live in the protected cities, especially the fortress cities like Chi-Town. The Coalition is fantastic. They're quite literally lifesavers. And they have this idyllic life compared to 95% of the rest of the people, and certainly in North America.
Mm-hmm.
And so to them, Emperor Prosek is this amazing guy. And the Coalition Army, yes, kill monsters and crush aliens and kill psycho mages. But they don't really think about the ramifications or how far they go, or that these are other people with feelings and emotions and families just like theirs. And again, it's just that perception. And there's a million great stories. There was a point where Matthew Clements and I thought about doing a series on the Chi-Town burbs that were going to be sort of film noir.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, like
I'm in. What do you need to make this happen?
Absolutely. As someone who ran a Casablanca-esque game set in Rifts, I am there for this. Like,
it even has the Victor Laszlo.
Oh, it does. which is literally why I ran the game, because it was after Wormwood came out and Victor Laszlo became a real thing, a real extant thing in the setting again, and I just happened to be watching Casablanca. It's a good movie for cigar and scotch. What can I say? And I grabbed a notebook and I was starting to write, and I literally ran a Casablanca-esque game set in riffs, with on Fringe territory. I can't even remember where I said it now. I remembered going through like 6 books to figure out where could I find this border of the coalition. Coalition is trying to influence rather than just outright occupy, a la Casablanca.
Mexican border.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, actually, it was New Mexico.
Yeah.
It was Taos, New Mexico. That's where that story was right there. And Kevin, you were talking about how when you give people comfort, security, and get those basic human needs met, they'll often not think about things outside of that. The flip side of that is when you take a character that's coming from that background and then inject them into the rest of the world, and they start to face the ramifications of that comfort.
Absolutely.
That is literally what I like to explore with those characters.
Well, we want to see more of that kind of exploration as we delve more into the Minion War.
Mm-hmm.
And, Heroes of Humanity, we're not saying that the Coalition is the heroes of humanity. They're saying they're the heroes of humanity. And being out there and actually forced to work with DBs and various types of magic users, it's just, some of them will always hate them.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to have that kind of unreasoning prejudice, sadly, in the world. But a lot of them go, wow, this is not what I expect. They're not the vile animals that we were told they were, and they're heroic. And my God, this DB just sacrificed his life for me, or this mage, just saved me, or saved my best friend, or saved my family. And how do you reconcile having dealt with years of they're the enemy, the faceless, nameless enemy that we just kill without a second thought, to, gosh, they're people too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's awesome.
I love it when I see stuff like that in the Palladium stories, and I love it when I see the opposite.
Yes.
Case in point, going back to Vampire Kingdoms, Doc Reed.
Oh, yeah.
Doc Reed, and I forget the name of the Cyber Knight who works with him, who has turned to darkness, but
yeah.
Yeah.
They're only heroes if you're normally living with vampires.
Yeah. And then you start to read all of the rambling. Okay, one of the beautiful things about the Vampire Kingdoms book is how crazy Doc Reed is.
Oh, yeah. Megalomaniacal psychopath of the first order. Yeah. And
yeah, he's just one step shy of Dr. Mengele when it comes to that.
Absolutely.
So, Doc Reed, where did he come from?
I was a big fan of the Lone Ranger, and it's sort of my twisted vampire take. And in fact, in the Lone Ranger mythos, the Lone Ranger is John Reed.
Mm-hmm. You just realized that, didn't you?
What? Okay.
Yeah.
So that.
Oh my God!
So it's a combination. It's Lone Ranger meets vampires.
Yeah.
For me.
Holy
in the
shit!
World.
I never made that connection.
I will dig it up because
wow, that sudden wow. Okay.
There was it was in the 90s. It wasn't right when Riffs came out, but somebody wrote a really great story from the point of view of someone opposed by the Lone Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the flip side of a Lone Ranger story. And you suddenly realize what this weird vigilante who's running around shooting up, the what the effects of that vigilantism is, and it was super interesting. And given I had already picked up on the Doc Reed Lone Ranger connection, and I think it was an article that you had contributed to, or one of those early Usenet Ask Me Anythings or something, where you had tied that together, so I was aware of it, and it was like, that story is like, oh my god,
that blows my mind, and I love it even more now. Yeah.
I do want to point out that the real life Texas Ranger, who was a black man, Bass, something similar, like Bass Reeves or something.
Yeah. The problem is nowadays, whenever I try to think of his name, I go Bass Rudin, who's a UFC fighter, which is entirely wrong.
He was amazing. He was a black man. He was, and again, for people, I hear some criticism sometimes of like, how can these people be completely illiterate? So many people be completely illiterate. That guy was illiterate. He was an escaped slave.
Yeah.
Who ended up, working in the so-called Indian territory back then of Kansas and Oklahoma. And this guy brought in like 200 desperados. He was a master of disguise and subterfuge. He was like strong and smart and could not fucking read. And it was just that the real life individual, which I think the Paramount channel was doing. It started a miniseries on him. But it was like very early on. I didn't feel like they were doing him justice from everything I've read about this individual. This guy was like superhuman. He was like incredible. And people believe that he was actually the real life inspiration for the Lone Ranger. But he was like a horse whisperer and just this amazing guy. And just the fact that he brought in like 200 freaking criminals. He tried not to kill people, much like the Lone Ranger. He would go in disguise, and it was just, the guy's a freaking phenomenon. And I hope people discover him because it's amazing. But yeah, that was, like I said, everything gives me ideas. And, one of the things about the Lone Ranger is he was originally created here in Detroit for a radio station back when they were doing radio stories. And so when I found that out, I tried to listen to as many of the old radio stories. And the same thing, the Green Hornet was created here at the same radio station. And in the original radio mythology, the Green Hornet, Britt Reed, is like the great grandson or great grandnephew, I think, of the Lone Ranger, and inherits like his silver mine, which is why he's got money. And that's just some cool stuff, right?
Yep.
And just, I'm fascinated by all kinds of stories, everything. It's funny, I don't really talk about radio shows because that's really way before my time. But some of that stuff I would listen to because of its origins here in Detroit. Just everything. And that's where, for writers out there, you want to be a writer or you want to be a game designer, draw from everything. Let everything inspire you, light you up, and see where it takes you.
I'm not going to lie. Whenever you get around to doing the West Coast of the United States, I've been secretly kind of waiting to see if suddenly this guy named Anthony Rogers suddenly pops out of a mine that he's been in suspended animation since the early 1900s.
Well, you've also got to put a DB Cooper in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, back to vampires, though. When did your vampires become your vampires?
Actually, it goes back into the Defilers. That's where I really developed my vampires. My idiots, they, with nothing but love, they wanted to fight vampires. So I had created this massive level of vampires. It was basically a vampire kingdom. And the Palladium Desire had this mix of magic and technology. So they're about to hit the elevator, this big, giant freight elevator that all 26 guys could fit in. They're about to hit level 4 to fight vampires when one of them says, hey, we're always going down into the dungeon. Why don't we go out into the world, see what's there? And as the game master, I'm thinking, I have no flipping idea what's there. I've been focused on this dungeon, and someone else goes, "Yeah, that's great." I'm like, "Okay, guys, vampires. This is what you've been waiting for." And they end up, there's like this domino effect where more and more people, yeah, we should go and explore. And we had a great adventure and ended up exploring for like a damn year outside of Palladium Desire. But yeah, I'd really developed my vampires for that. So when they finally fought the vampires, they a year and a half later, which was kind of good because they were badasses by then and had a lot of power, could really stand up to a bunch of vampires. But even then, they got their butts kicked because I don't know. It's funny. I don't really think of myself as a horror guy, but I watched tons and tons and tons of horror in this late 50s and 60s, especially with Hammer, the UK Hammer movies with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. I mean, there were just a ton of different vampire movies coming out, and I saw tons of them. And I read a lot about different myths, and I took all the best myths that I liked, and stole some stuff from like movies and stuff. Like I really loved the vampires are affected by running water; they can't cross running water. That's a European myth. And I liked that, and I liked what they did in Lost Boys with like squirt guns and stuff. That just made sense to me. And again, there's another example of what a weird place to be inspired. But Lost Boys, I loved that movie, especially back in the day. It doesn't hold up so well today, but
it really doesn't. It's got some really good one-liners.
Yeah. Just don't ever watch the sequel.
You mean there's like 7 sequels or something right now?
Any of them.
So it's funny. Just last night, I introduced my wife to The Night Stalker because this is October. Every year for October, she does the thing where she watches the spooky movie every day. And she's not normally into horror movies. So this is the one time of the year where I'm like, oh, I'm going to show her a new horror movie. Yeah. And she'd never seen The Night Stalker. So we watched it last night, and I just remember that scene where they're fighting at the house and they fall into the pool, and he's still just kicking their ass. And I'm like, that's not a Palladium vampire.
No.
No.
Well, one of the things I liked, I saw a commonality in a lot of ancient myths where weird stuff affects the supernatural. Like if you look at a lot of Chinese myth, there's a lot of strange things with, like, the branch of a peach tree or a peach pit.
Yeah.
Or, this blossom or that blossom or this tree or that tree, will hurt or kill creature X. And it runs throughout crazy superstitions all the time, both European and Asian. And so I kind of incorporated that kind of stuff into my overriding supernatural premises, where all these creatures, why does Silver hurt a werewolf? At least it's a metal and they're getting shot or stabbed by it. So that kind of makes more intuitive sense. But, why does garlic affect a vampire? Or wolf's bane, or any of that other kind of weird stuff, putting a stake in a vampire's heart. And the whole thing, like it's real mythology. And again, I cherry picked because there's vampires all over the place. And I picked the different myths and superstitions that resonated most with me and made sense to me, at least at the time. And so it's real mythology that you can't just stake a vampire. You've got to chop off his head, and then you need to burn the head and the body, or bury the head and the body separately. And they don't actually say they'll come back together, I don't think. But it's like, why else would you have to burn them separately, right?
Right.
In my mind, the way I'm thinking. So I incorporate those various aspects into it. And like I said, there's a certain mythology, I think it's European, where They can't cross running water, and they had a great fantasy campaign where with Bill Coffin. It was actually a one-shot, one-night thing with Bill Coffin and Alex and a bunch of people. Because they asked me, can wolfen become vampires? And I'm like, yeah, why not? So yes, dog boys can become vampires. And
oh no!
and it was just really wild because it added a different kind of, because they're so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I know some movies and things present vampires as being superhuman and super fast and running and stuff, but I mean wolfen are naturally that fast, and they're giant sized, and the group's like, we crossed the river, they can't come after us, because they it was just a narrowish river or stream, and but the wolfen, I mean, they're vampires now, they got spears and stuff, and they're like, they weren't safe just because of the river. And same thing, they were in a church and they're like, we're fine, until the wolfen set the church on fire.
Right. That was the one thing I absolutely loved about Vampire Kingdoms, is the vampires were not stupid. Like,
no.
Yeah, like they have a basement full of auto-staked functionally newborn, starved to death vampires auto-staked in the basement, that if you try to come kick down their front door, you've just created a bigger problem. It's like...
Well, and I just saw, it seemed like there was like, the classic Dracula story. You've got the master vampire, which is Dracula, and he creates all these secondary vampires. You see this all the time, that kind of thing. I just put words to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see these kind of feral vampires. And I'm like, okay, that's the wild vampires. And each stage, they get a little more devolved and a little less smart, a little less powerful. But, also, I mean, that was the first time, anyone fights a vampire. One of my vampires in any setting, whether it's Rifts or any of them, it's, they're kicking vampire ass, and they're probably fighting, they're probably getting hurt. And all of a sudden, the vampires turn to mist or into a bat and fly off. And they're like, hey, that's cool. We won, right? And I'm like, they're gone until they come back after they heal up and just keep wearing the heroes down, because they can turn into mist or into an animal and run off and give themselves times to regenerate and come back in an hour and fight again. And meanwhile, the humans, their resources, their weapons, their hit points in SDC or MDC are getting lower and lower and lower. And it's just, vampires are smart. It's a war of attrition.
Your vampires are the first and possibly only occurrence that I have ever seen of vampires that are connected to an alien intelligence. So I'm curious, at what point did you decide Cthulhu plus vampires equals Palladium vampires?
Honestly, I think that happened with Rifts and Vampire Kingdoms.
Okay.
I went back and I think added it to Western Empire for Palladium Fantasy, but it came out of Rifts and Vampire Kingdoms. Because again, what creates the master vampire? It just can't come out of nowhere. And I like the idea of they're demons, but they're almost still kind of like a virus, where there's just more and more as they kill their host and turn some of them into them. And it's just this great invasion setup, but it works very much like a virus. And what's the source of that virus? It's an alien intelligence.
And it also does a thing that was the counter to the 90s White Wolf thing. Yeah. Which was Palladium, the vampires, like, in no uncertain terms, you are no longer there. Yeah. You are gone. That person doesn't exist. That person is gone. That person cannot come back. You are now 100%, without a doubt, irrevocably a monster from outer space or from the other dimensions. And it takes it and turns it into something that, I've always felt with White Wolf that they were trying to make the vampires more human, the whole human versus the beast thing. No, these are fucking monsters.
Yep. No questions asked.
These are monsters.
Yep.
You kill them.
Yep.
Or you run away. Yeah.
Well, because again, historically, vampires were demons. Everything I read, it's like they're a demon. I don't care if it's the Australian version or the Chinese version or the European version. They're flipping demons, man, and they're out to suck your blood and kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing nice about them. They don't glitter in the sunlight. They don't, have sweet emotions. Oh, you're so pretty. Yeah, they might think you're so pretty, and they might do things with you, and then they're gonna frickin' eat you, because that's what they do. And I said it in Mexico and South America because I just thought that fit beautifully with stone pyramids and all these different the Mayans, the Aztec, the Toltec. They all believed in blood sacrifices at these temples, and it was just like perfect for the way my twisted brain works, and with ley lines and everything else. So,
did you ever meet or maybe even play games with or have conversations with Hollywood director producer Robert Rodriguez?
No, I wish.
Have you seen a movie called From Dusk Till Dawn?
I sure have.
Because it is basically somebody's Vampire Kingdoms game made into a movie.
Exactly.
Like it's fantastic.
Yeah.
They speed through the whole transition.
But
definitely. One does not beget the other, but they were drawing from the same gestalt.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Rodriguez was a Palladium player.
I would not be surprised.
That'd be cool. A lot of these guys are. I'm shocked at how many people played my stuff. Okay, still taking this vampire thing because it's on my brain now. Vampire Kingdoms, what led to the revised version? Part of it was the fact that I felt vampires needed to be kind of more explained, because since Anne Rice and World of Darkness and Vampire and True Blood and a lot of the modern representation of vampires they're just these tragic people who are fighting their darker inner self, and that's great if you're into those kind of stories. I mean, I don't mind them. I thought True Blood was a decent show, and I've seen the Twilight movies. They're all right. I've never read the books, but they're not what I always thought of as vampires. And I felt like I needed to do more of that. Plus, I had some new ideas. I wanted to de-emphasize the traveling show aspects because people didn't seem to really gravitate to that a lot. And I wanted to do a bit more with, the Vampire Kingdoms themselves and kind of move it ahead so that you see Doc Reed about to launch his own big war on the Vampire Kingdoms.
If anybody in the Palladium universe could somehow get crazier, he achieved it.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah.
But you get that because he's batshit crazy. No pun intended with vampires. But yeah, I mean, he's out there. And he's another guy who, from a certain perspective, he's a good guy-ish.
Yeah. He's a man of singular focus that will not let things like petty morality get between him and his objective of destroying all vampire kind.
Yeah. God, seriously though, Vampire Kingdoms was such a good book.
Yeah.
Like, what a way to kick it off. You've got this great core game just oozing with opportunity, complete with some enemies in the end and a random enemy generator, which is one of my favorite things to ever see in a book.
Mm-hmm. You like your random tables, sir.
I do. I love random tables so much. And then the first world book comes out and it's just bam. Here's another place where shitty things are happening, and here's some things for you to do in that place, and here's all the things that are going to kill you in that place. Go.
Yep.
Well, and I wanted to get across. So between Sourcebook 1 and the original Rifts RPG, I didn't want people to think it was just science fantasy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do a book that was, vampires, that was horror, and said, you expect anything in this world. And between Vampire Kingdoms and Atlantis, I think I did a good job at that.
Yeah, that original trifecta, and to a lesser extent, the first source book with Archie, really set the tone of like, you cannot expect where we're going on this.
Yeah, I mean, you go from North America with these kind of semi-Nazi analog kind of things. I mean, they're basically wearing Hugo Boss in those pictures, to the Vampire Kingdoms, to fucking Atlantis. It's just boom, boom, boom. Hey, I gotcha. And wow. It just unleash your imagination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Jacob said a word, and that word was Archie.
Yes. Archie 3.
Of the Archies, I've counted 8. One of them is Archie 0.
Yes.
I think that was in one of the things. Did you initially want that to happen, or is that something that people have just done and you've been like, oh yeah, that's cool, add that to a book?
Well, I mean, I figured Archie was a prototype, and that there had to be others. That's why there's Archie 7 in Mutants in Orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me. I figured there were other Archies. I mean, however many have survived. But Archie is the one that's truly, arguably sentient-ish. I mean, he is the machine god. He's trying to figure things out. He can't. He's still struggling. Hagen's helped him a lot. But, he's still trying to figure out human beings. And then, you got the complication of what's all this other shit? These aliens and these vampires and, crazy creatures from Atlantis. I mean, geez, Pete.
DARPA did not prepare me for this mission profile.
Exactly. He was struggling enough with humans and their duality, let alone all this other crazy stuff.
So how did it feel as a creator when you've got these games under your wing, you've just put out Rifts, and it explodes, and your magnum opus becomes true? And then with another source book, you take it all the way back to where it began and bridge the gap. You complete the circle. How did it feel putting the mechanoids out there again?
Oh, it was fun. It was nice. And I'm glad people really got a chance to kind of rediscover them and enjoy them. And, I had to be careful with it because, down the road, licensing wise, in my mind, they're a whole separate IP. So honestly, it's a business reason why you haven't seen them resurface in Rifts.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, they're so powerful. I mean, do we really want to see Rifts Earth get eaten by mechanoids? I don't think so. But because they are world devourers. But it was fun. It was real fun. It was a blast. And Newton Yule did a nice job re-envisioning the mechanoids 2.0.
Mm.
So yeah, it was great.
The artist, yes, Newton, yes. Oh
artist,
my god,
sorry.
oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
yes. We comment on that when we have looked at his works, at how really spot on he was, emulating your designs, but making them just taking that design and making it look as if, okay, it almost looked as if like you had a protege take over the work in the way that they would look. You could easily look at it if you weren't looking at the list of credits and think, did Kevin draw this?
Yeah.
He did a really good job with that.
Yeah. And that's a really hard thing to do, to be perfectly honest. And he did it well.
Well, we were on a roll, and I think, Kevin Long really set the bar high for art between Long and Parkinson, so I think when other artists came in, they're like, well, I got to up my game, man, and do this right. So, and Newton was a fan of the Mechanoids.
Yeah, it shows. It shows. All right, Kevin, we've had you here for at least 2 hours, and we could talk for many hours more. I think this is a good spot for us to put a pause on this and come back to it very, very soon.
Yeah.
As long as you're down to keep doing these, we're down to keep doing these.
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent.
Okay. Well, dear listener, thank you for joining us on this series. We have more to come. Please stop by our Discord, say hello, post your questions, your thoughts, and then when you're done, head on over to the Palladium Books website and pick up a copy of Rifts. And very specifically, Kevin, are these still around, the hardbacks?
Oh no, they sold out like lightning.
Oh man. Well, but you've still
I wish
got.
I made a whole bunch more of those. It was funny. Pre-orders are really low, so I only printed like 250. I could have sold 1,000 easy. I should have known better. I was dumb. They're super rare.
Yeah, I'm holding up the gold foil 30th anniversary limited edition. I've got number 4 of 200. I'm very proud of that. I don't know who no 1, 2, and 3 are, but I must find them and kill them in their sleep. Because there can be only one.
Given it's entirely possible that 1, 2, or 3 is owned by Kevin, sir.
It's probably true.
Actually, that's the case with most of the gold editions. I don't think it is with that. I forget who has number 1.
Yeah, at the moment I saw like there was a message or something that sent out. It's like click, buy, done. It's like, okay, it's happening. It's a beautiful book, and we'll go into this a little bit more. But you can still get the normal edition though for this, right? With all the content at the end and the interviews, the discussions, and the behind the scenes stuff.
Yep, and the beautiful original Keith Parkinson color cover. Yep.
Oh, and the 2-page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with we've got what Source Book 1 and Vampire Kingdoms on the inside, the front inside, and the back inside cover. Ooh.
Yep.
Yeah, for the end sheets. Yep.
Cool. Yes, dear listener, please head over there and pick this up. Rifts has gone through many books. World books, source books, dimension books, and more. And you can go back and buy that first one and take a look at this fantastic game that we're talking about today. Is this one still available in PDF?
Yeah, should be. Yeah.
Oh, even better.
Yep.
Yeah, it's available on PDF.
Yeah.
The original game. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Well, Kevin, we will talk to you again soon. And that's right. You just this week hit go on a very special thing that happens every year around this time.
Every year.
Well, for the last 26 years, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Christmas prize packages. Yep. They were supposed to go the 24th. We even did a special little promo that said, 24th of October. And then so many people were inquiring about them already that we felt like we needed to launch them sooner. So yes, they're available right now. $60 gets you $100 or more, often more than $100 worth of books. You can send us your Christmas wish list. I make a selection from them. I read every single grab bag that's sent to us, and including the comments. And we will sign books if you want them, me and the available staff. And any freelancers who happen to walk through that door. And, much to their chagrin, sign these 200 books or 500 books. Yeah, we're happy to do it. We love it. You guys love it. And they started this weekend.
Woo! There goes a paycheck.
Christmas comes early, folks. Christmas comes early. Head on by to palladiumbooks.com and get your annual Christmas grab bag. Buy early, buy often.
And buy now.
All right. Good night, folks. We will catch you next time.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Glitterbois, a Palladium Books fan podcast. Glitterbois, Rifts, the Megaverse, and all other such topics are the property of Kevin Siembieda and Palladium Books. Please buy all their stuff and help keep them in print and making more games. You can order directly at palladiumbooks.com, and their entire catalog is available digitally at Drive-Thru RPG as well. Our opening music is 8-Bit Bass and Lead by Furby Guy from freesound.org. This closing music is Caravana by Philip Gross, available at freemusicarchive.org. All sound effects used are self-made or acquired via Creative Commons Zero license. If you like what you have heard, find us on Twitter and Facebook as The Glitterbois. That's BOIS. And check us out online at breakfastpuppies.com/glitterboys. And also join us on the Breakfast Puppies Network Discord at breakfastpuppies.com/discord. And if you want to help us out, please spread the word and help us build a community. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time.